Welcome to Living in the Light. I'm Marion, and today I'm excited that we have Reles, and he is a Sasquatch, Bigfoot investigator and expert, and he's from North Carolina, and he has led dozens of expeditions into the wild, and he's a partner at Iknowsquatch for apparel and merchandise. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you for having me, Mary. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. Again, we talked about a year or so ago, year and a half ago, and I really enjoyed it.
Yes, we've spoken a few times, and I have not been mentioning Bigfoot, but I am a Bigfoot lover, investigator myself, where I have many books on Bigfoot.
Right. Yeah, you do.
I've done a lot of my own Sasquatch, Bigfoot research. And so this to me is exciting to have you on. And so let's get into it. Welcome.
Welcome.
Did you first hear about Bigfoot?
Well, yeah, actually, we've talked many times, but I think we did actually on a podcast, I don't know, a year and a half ago, talk about Bigfoot and some of its abilities and things, and how it ties into a lot of what you look at, energy and some of the lights, types of things that go. I've had a lot of experiences along those lines. I first got interested in this in 2010 because I saw one. I was driving with a business associate in northern Wisconsin. We saw one across the road. And so 13 years later, I decided to get involved, investigate, get out in the wild, get involved with the BFRO, which is a Bigfoot field research organization, and go on expeditions, go to places nobody goes, in the middle of the night, walk around, try to have contact with these things. And I'm glad to tell you that I know these things are real because I've interacted with them. You trust your eyes more than anything, but I've seen them, smelled them, had rocks thrown at me by them, cast their footprints, been around them many times, interacted with them. Sometimes you do get a chance to interact with them too. And led a lot, like you said, led a lot of expeditions.
So this very first time, and you said in 2010, and you saw one of these guys, and he was crossing the road. What did you see? Can you explain that experience, and what were you feeling?
Well, I didn't know. The thing is, and I interview witnesses now, as part of the BFRO, I go on out and investigate. So people will file reports with the BFRO, and then they come in by county. And I'm in Western North Carolina now. I've done this in Tennessee. I did it in Wisconsin. I lived in a number of places, but I go on out and talk to people, and they say, and I'll tell you, this is what happened to me, that they didn't know what they were seeing. When you first experience this, you're like, what? What could this possibly be? And you go through the process of, well, is it a deer? Is it an elk? Is it a bear? What am I looking at? Especially if you can see it for a few seconds. And that's what happened to me the first time. I saw a bipedal thing go across the road right around dusk while we were driving. Not sure what we saw. Yeah, actually, the guy that I was with kind of afterwards said, "Nah, that can't be what it is. Must be an elk." I looked. There's no elk in the area. I've had other encounters since. I've seen these things. I saw one in northwest Colorado in 2018. I saw one in the mountains of Virginia, in 2016, and then 2018 I saw one in Virginia. I saw one crawl across a trail once in North Georgia. Saw a little one run down a path. Wasn't sure what I was seeing then, but I mean, I've seen these enough with my eyes. Like I said, you trust that the most to know that these things are real, not a fleeting shadow, not, possibly a bear or something else, to know and distinguish when I look at it that what I'm looking at is not a bear, not human. And so, I keep doing it. I just got back from an expedition, and, that's why, so I have this little, you mentioned, Iknowsquatch, but we have this, I have a partner, Hans Wolbeer, up in Wisconsin. He and I started Iknowsquatch for people like myself who know these exist. So you see, I believe people wear their shirts out. Bigfoot's popular now in apparel and shirts and hats and everything. And it says, I believe or believe. Well, for people that know it exists, that actually put the time in to investigate this like us, we started Iknowsquatch, and we do all our own original artwork, and we have apparel and an Etsy store. We're on Instagram and Facebook, but Iknowsquatch, kind of talk about, show the lifestyle, and then we have apparel that shows and depicts Bigfoot kind of in the way that people do interact or see it. Like we have it peeking around a tree. That's what a lot of times hunters say they see one of them looking in the woods at them, peeking around the tree. We have the strider running here. I've got one in my head, but we have it running as it, people see it meandering across in front of them on a trail, that sort of thing. People continue to see these things. There's a lot of sightings out there, and I think there's a lot of Bigfoots.
Okay, so let me show. So basically, I remember because I recall because I had done so much research. So Bigfoot, let's give our viewers some insight into exactly what a Bigfoot looks like. So
Sure.
Bigfoot is in range anything between 6 and 8 to plus height, right? 8 feet tall, 6 to 8 feet tall.
Yeah, and that kind of depends geographically, at least where we are in the United States, where it is. Reports of these things down in Florida, they call it the skunk ape down there, because the smell, are typically 6 to 7 foot. But there are reports of this thing in the Midwest, 8, 9 foot all the time. And when you get up towards northern Canada, Alaska, reports come in that are over 10 feet, 11, 12 foot all the time, too. I have been on an expedition where we had a couple of guys were out on a night hike, see more than one of these things that were well beyond 10 foot tall. So that's pretty big.
It's huge. It's not even anything you can imagine, like saying it and then actually having the experience. So they have fur around their face. And you just mentioned the smell. They have a very strong smell.
Yep.
And what you said when you've seen them. Now, the first time you saw a Bigfoot, and then following that, you saw Bigfoot. What was the feeling that you got? How did you feel? Like, what kind of feeling comes over you energetically? Like, do you feel, are you like shocked? Are you like startled? What happens when you encounter Bigfoot?
So yes and yes to all of that. And you still don't get used to it. I can be around these things in the woods at 2 a.m. on an expedition and know they're near me without seeing it, but can hear it. Maybe they're pushing trees down or tossing rocks or pebbles at you or making noises you hear it. And it's still startling. I mean, it's still, it's exhilarating. You're still dealing with something that's not recognized by science formally. But that's why it's good that people, and the interest level is going up. People say they believe, and I think that's good. I know, but even knowing these things exist, it's hard to believe sometimes. I've had trees pushed down, big trees in the woods within 20 yards of me, and that power is the thing that strikes you. How powerful these things can be. The one I saw in Virginia, each time I've seen one, I've had other people with me that were witnesses too. But the one I saw in Virginia was easily 9 foot tall, black, had to be 800 pounds. And I woke up the next morning just scratching my head saying, how could anything that big be that fast? Because it's almost like when they move, they're on skates. They are fast when you see them in the woods. They maneuver quickly through the woods. They're stealth. They get around quickly. If they want to be, it's not like you can sneak up on them and you can use tech, infrared and every other thing to get yourself up on one of these. You're not going to trick them. They know you're there. I think they know you're there before you get there. If they want to interact and be around them.
Do you believe that they are instinctually moving this way, or are they highly intelligent? What are you sensing about them?
So that's a great question. So what I sense about them is that they move. People say to me, "What do you think it is? Is it an ape? Is it a human? Is it a derivative? You hear people ask, is it alien?" They don't know. There's studies on the DNA and those kinds of things that are out there. The Melba Ketchum studies. If you're any of your listeners, your viewers are
Melba Ketchum. I tried to get her interview. Yeah, I spoke to her about this.
Oh, did you really? That's great. Yeah, she published too early, probably without peer review, so they discredited a lot of what she had. But the samples that went into that came from very reliable sources. So David Paulides, who writes the 411 books, My friends, Scott Carpenter, he's written a number of books and has supplied. She had very, very good source of DNA material, primarily hair. And that all went into that. And it said it was 95% human, 5% unidentified. So you say instinctually, how do they move? I think they're moving. I think they have abilities, including how they locomote. And it can be on all fours, or it could be standing up bipedal. I think they move at a way we can't. They're fast, and then some people report seeing one of them, and then it's not there. So that's hard to figure too. So I think they are physical beings, but they have paranormal abilities. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I was going to say that I wonder if they're traveling on another time and space mode. I do have a theory that they are actually a species of aliens, and because they seem to move in and like disappear, like you said,
Right.
and also how come we can't discover them or catch one, and they have some kind of telepathic skills, so they can either read minds or know that you're present, and maybe they are partial like this other species, and maybe they have, I don't know if they're human. I don't think they're human. I don't sense that they're human. They have another capacity than human, but I've never seen one like you have. I've just researched them.
Well, the Native Americans will say they're forest people and regard them as people of the forest. So I don't believe it's an ape. I started this out thinking undiscovered ape, read a lot of books on it that were down that path. And if you go back 10 years, there was a lot of it. A lot of the science was along those lines with, the research. We're all amateur researchers when it comes to this. But you don't see as much of that now. Based on the witnesses that have come forward, the encounters, they're not all physical encounters saying, hey, I saw this ape-like creature in the woods and it was swinging tree to tree and beating on its chest. It's not that kind of thing.
Right.
That's not what goes on. The encounters are, when you look at it, when people see one, and then, as you said, maybe get a thought in their mind or words in their mind, or hear it, hear it mimicking other animals of the forest, or see one of these things, and things going on that are way beyond just normal, cognate or hominid. So ape or human, there are abilities with these things that are beyond, and there isn't any science record that's going to tell us what they are. So we still are down to, even years later, a lot of amateur researchers like myself getting out in the woods and just trying to experience these things. And it is like the gift that keeps on giving. I keep learning more and more about this, having more and more experiences that are hard to explain.
So tell us, if you would like, share with us, because I already know this, but for the viewers who don't know, I'm probably going to hear some new information. Can you explain what is the process? So someone contacts you to go on a weekend, an expedition. I know they're all over the USA. And then what happens, and then what do you do? And then maybe one of the experiences you had that is the most memorable, or something that you would like to share.
Yeah, sure. So the BFRO, the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, there are some state organizations out there, by state, where there's a lot of activity. But BFRO is probably the most predominant, been around the longest, has the most extensive database. And I'm one of a couple hundred people like myself in the country who do meet with local witnesses and try to vet these things out, and then keep the database, up to date with where there are encounters or experiences. And then there's clusters of these. You can go into the database, bfro.net. Any of your listeners can do that and go on in and see the reports of these that have been vetted out by an investigator like myself, down to the county in the state they're in. So if you're curious about that, you could go see if there's been any, legitimate Bigfoot reports. You can see that. Now, when we do an expedition, we will look for clusters of those types of things geographically. So you were in Ryan, you're still up in New York, right?
Yeah, I am.
So okay, I know that they run some in northern New York. I know on the Vermont-New York border up near Whitehall and up in that way. I think there's been some BFRO investigations, expeditions into that area. And there's been a lot of activity up there. I know there has. Historically, there
Goodness, I'm going to find this out.
has. So, you know, if you were interested and you wanted to go on one, you could, if there is one posted on that site, and usually there are 6, 8, 10 of these things posted at a time around the country. But if you were interested, then you would get a hold of the BFRO, say, "Hi, Mary Amy, I would like to go on one of these things." And then an investigator that's organizing would interview you on the phone, talk to you about the activity that goes on. There are, you know, liability releases, NDAs, non-disclosures. We don't want the press and other people knowing what we're doing and where we're doing it. And if you're accepted, you know, there's a small fee, but then you go for 3 nights and 3 days kind of thing. The investigators are there usually 4 or 5 days for the whole thing, and that have scouted it. Usually scouting for like a year into the area before we get out there. Now we'll know the trails to take, the places to go, and we'll have at night hikes. We'll take groups out. Groups are typically, you know, 6 people in a group, a lead investigator, maybe a second, and then 4 people that are along with them. We always have different types of equipment. We audio record. We definitely bring forward-looking infrared FLIR devices or night vision. We'll bring things to provoke them, to maybe draw attention. A Bluetooth speaker, we can play some music. Something we can make knock noises because they knock when they communicate. We'll go on out at night, 8, 9 o'clock when it's dark, and if it's very active, like I had a really active night this past Saturday night deep in the Smoky Mountains. I didn't get back to the campsite till 4:30 in the morning. So, you know, that's how it goes. And it's sort of like fishing. Sometimes you fish, and you don't catch it. You cast, you don't catch anything. Sometimes Bigfoot, you go out and they come around. And when they do, it can be intense, it can be exhilarating, it can be fun, or sometimes they run you right out of the area because they don't want you around. But that's typically how it goes. We'll have speakers at an expedition that will talk about different subjects, talk about how to cast footprints, talk about the things that we're talking about now, maybe review different books and the best books on the subject, or you know, what it is, where it resides. Daytime scouting, we'll go on out during the day and scout these things, which are a lot of times if we have encounters at night, we go back to the spot we were at the night before. We'll go into there the next day and we get footprint casts and things. So, you know, we're looking for evidence in this. You're always looking for evidence. You'd like, if you have an encounter, you can't guarantee that will happen. But there's, you know, we get physical evidence like footprints, audio evidence like howls and screams and whoop noises and knocks. And sometimes we see some pretty wild things too. I know you like to talk about, you know, balls of light and that sort of thing a lot, energy manifestations.
Right.
We get that Bigfoot a lot.
So what's that like? What do you mean? Explain that to us.
Well, so, and I'm glad to discuss this with you because I know you're very good.
Totally.
You're very good with the whole light and manifestation energy type of thing. And I'll tell you, there are times Bigfooting when these things happen and you're not prepared for it. I had a number of these balls of light things for a few years and nothing for a few years. And I go on 4 to 6 expeditions a year, you know, maybe another 2 or 3 private. I do some daytime research, but 3 times last year, I saw balls of lights in the woods. One followed me and 3 others up a trail. And so we're aware that they were around because we had heard stick breaks and movement and a whistle, a couple whistle noises. And you always have your head on a swivel when you're Bigfooting. And I turned around and looked back down the trail. So I sensed something there. And here's this ball of light moving down the trail about 100 yards behind us. And it's moving. There was a stream that was running right along parallel to the path. And it was following the stream just at path level. And it had to be the size of between a softball and a basketball. And I probably watched this for, I don't know, 5 to 10 seconds somewhere in there, moving along. And then it went behind a tree and it didn't come back. Another time last year, across the field, 200 yards across the field, I was leading this investigation in the mountains of South Carolina. And we got to a field up in a wildlife management area way back in the woods, middle of nowhere. And we saw some shadowing moving around in the woods. And we came upon a field and stopped 200 yards across the field. I saw a ball of light surface up in the woods and then move around the edge of the field and then disappear. Sent a different group into that same area the next night. Same experience. They saw the same thing. So, we debunked it, went back during the day, looked for any starlight, city light. We're always cognizant of those types of things. But these things, when they move, they seem to move it like intelligence. Third time last year, I was scouting in an area in very far southeast Tennessee, in the mountains. And a lot of times we'll get on a road that goes around the side of a mountain on a ridge, and we'll get in the elbow or the switchback, and we'll sit there because we can be viewed if they come around from above, and then we can hear things in a ravine below. And we will always position our chairs northeast, southwest, so we can watch all directions. And so I was looking up the ravine, and we'd been there about an hour or so, and we're talking and using infrared and listening. We'd done some provocation, and we sensed there was movement above us. And all of a sudden, over the top of this hill comes a ball of light moving down in between the trees. And I'm telling everybody, nobody move, nobody move. I can see there's a ball of light coming down the hill. And a couple of people turned and caught it as it sort of went out. But I don't know what that is. I don't know how that happens. It's not a naturally occurring thing. You're not going to pick up a science book and read about balls of light that are moving around the woods at night when Bigfoot's around. But I had three occurrences of that last year.
Well, I guess it's interesting that you are seeing them, because when I've experienced balls of light that I've seen in person myself, it was literally I was holding up my cell phone and I could see it because the video can catch it. And I've actually done videos where I've seen balls of light behind me, or they're moving across, and there's multiple. So it's interesting, and the size of what you're saying, that's remarkable. I find it fascinating that it's in relation to these Bigfoot that you're encountering around the area. So there must be a connection. Do you agree? I mean,
Yeah, I do. It's a manifestation of energy, or somehow they're deploying it, unless it just occurs naturally when they're there, and maybe they're always around. I don't. But it shows up and it's definitive. You can see it moves with intelligence too. So, when you've experienced these, so I've actually got I have actually some footage of a ball of light moving around. This is another ghost story thing, but I actually had some footage of one of that. And I got a picture of a ball of light in a cemetery in the land between the lakes area between Kentucky and Tennessee. I was on an expedition 2 years ago in a large, I want to say, haunted cemetery. Took random pictures. We had activity. We were there. We had motion sensor lights out on some of the gravestones, and they were going off. So I started to take random photos, and I got one. I got a picture of an orb moving through the sky. So, I know they can be around when there's paranormal activity, ghost activity, Bigfoot, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if it's the same. They do move. I was at it's interesting. I was in Ocala, Florida, 2 weeks ago at a Bigfoot conference, Florida Bigfoot conference, and a lot of great speakers at that. But one of them showed film of a ball of light moving around on a trail while they were out on an expedition. They filmed it, and you could see this thing for a period of time moving through the woods around them when they had Bigfoot activity. So I liked that. It was great. It was great footage, real evidence, great evidence. I don't know what that is, and if it's the same as when there is paranormal ghost type activity as when it is a Bigfoot or not, I don't know. But I'm here to tell you, it shows up.
There is definitely an intelligence related, whether or not it is actually an entity on its own, or you said maybe it's something that is surfacing, like, how do I say this, from a being or a species. Because when I've experienced it where I've seen it either in person, where I was in the room and I held up and then they were moving around, there was different color ones. They definitely were conscious and they wanted to be seen.
Interesting.
And they also came up during certain times you spoke. Like if you spoke about certain subjects, then they appeared more. And
Interesting.
yeah, and you know, you know, I don't think, you know, for a long time, I just kept hearing an angel orb because no one really, like you said, there's no science book that you can open up and be like, what is this? And no
Mhm.
one's going to declare this to be a real thing. They're going to say, that's craziness. But they're not, it's not like anyone's really researching this, or maybe they already have and they haven't shared it with the public. So when you keep saying that you're just, you know, like a regular person, just having these experiences, you guys are the researchers, you guys are the scientists, because there's no one else who's really going out on these expeditions because you would know. Um,
Right.
and maybe the government already knows that they exist and they're just not sharing it with the public because they say, oh, that's just like science fiction or whatever you want to call it. But you've
Hmm.
seen them in person. Now, when you've seen them in person in the past, you mentioned something like they send out some kind of energy so that you cannot continue with the interaction. Like either they try to scare you, right? They mimic your voices. They, right? That
Yes.
and so it sounds like they can make their voice sound like a person, like a human, right?
They can, so that's one of the great abilities they have. Now, whether it's a physical ability or a paranormal ability, maybe it's a little of both. So this will be good for your listeners. I didn't make a list here. I'll just randomly spit out some of the things we've heard that they do, because a lot of, we are typically, although there are Bigfoot sightings close to cities and towns, sometimes we're usually out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, we're off the grid.
Like how deep into the woods are you? How deep do you go?
We're miles and miles and miles, and no. Last week we had no cell signal for 5 days. I mean, we're out there,
Right.
so yeah, it's that kind of a thing, So, but we're on trails and we're in areas where we always look for water sources, areas where there's been activity, maybe in state parks, campgrounds around there. But we want to get back somewhere where we can't mistake the city sound or light pollution from the city, or there's a lot of people, kind of getting in the way of things at night, driving up to you, etc. We want to be places where we have a chance for them to feel comfortable coming around. But we also want to be places where people do not go at night. Not a hiker, not a hunter, and we want, sometimes we'll park on some forest road, and then we'll go, walk a mile back in the woods, start a fire sitting in a clearing, above a pond or something, and just see if they come around. And if you're a Bigfoot and you frequent that area, and all of a sudden you got 5 people sitting there, and they're laughing or talking, which by the way works. That brings them in better than you can. Not going to get out there in a camo suit, ghillie suit, and hide behind some trees and scare them. Oh, here they come! I got them. Doesn't work that way. So I mean, they're experts in their own domain. They get it, and they work. There's never one of them. They're always in groups. But we'll try to get as remote as we can out there, and maybe they will come around to us. So, no, how deep do we go? We go places other people don't. And that's the kind of thing. So back to what they do and why they do it. I think I think they're human like in that regard. If they're having a bad day and we come around, they may just chase you out of there. And they'll shake trees and throw rocks and growl. Sometimes they just get frustrated with you and they go, ugh, like that, and they huff, and then it's time to go. I've had situations where I'd say to them, if you want us to go, let us know. And they'll make a huge knock sound, and it sounds like it's right next to you. Pow! Like, all right, I'll keep my part of the deal. I'm going. And we walk out of there, get in our truck or whatever, and leave. Other times we'll do things like play Native American music. I play harmonica sometimes. I've had people bring a guitar. We'll, blow on whistles or owl calls, play a flute type things. And we're relaxed and sitting somewhere doing that, maybe with a small fire, and we'll walk up and down trails and do that, and they'll come in. And that's because they're scratching their head, what are these people doing here in the middle of my woods? It's 1 a.m, and there's nobody here, and they don't seem to be worried about anything or scared of us. I kind of enjoy the entertainment, and they will sneak up around. They'll take positions like military all around the group. And if they want to interact, sometimes they'll mimic and come right back. This past Saturday night, we were playing Native American music. They were mimicking the flutes, and we could hear them. We could hear them crawling up. I think it was juveniles too, because it seems like they were lower to the ground. But they were making these noises. At first, we thought it was like a dove cooing. You know what that sounds like when a mourning dove makes a noise. But then it would continue and modulate and fluctuate up and down. There were inflections and patterns, and it was coming from more than one source. And we finally concluded they're mimicking the flute music that we were playing in the Native American music they were playing through a Bluetooth speaker. So, it's fascinating. That kind of thing to me is great. We never felt threatened, not at all. We had other things happen. We saw a green light in the woods, a red light in the woods. At one point, I did a whoop call because they whoop, they make noises like whoop, and I did one of those, and a big yellowish white light lit up in the woods right over the pond we're in for like 4 seconds and went out. Now, I don't know how they do that either. Okay, I really,
Alien spaceship,
yeah.
extraterrestrial. It's an extraterrestrial spaceship in the woods, and they're just dropping them down. It's time for you guys to go in the wilderness, and then pick them back up.
Yeah, here, we just dropped off more of them.
Anything's possible. You just mentioned juveniles. So explain to our viewers what you mean by that.
So I think they're quite often in family units. And I think they will stay together because it makes sense for them. They work as a group. There's never one. We've been in areas where there'll be a sentry. One will be, you can tell, posted. We walk into a trailhead and they knock loudly to let the others know. They can count. So there's 3 of us. Sometimes you have 1, 2, 3 knocks. And they're telling the other ones there's 3 people entering the trail going into the woods. What I mean by juveniles is it seems like the kids will, well, it's a smaller size and stature, but it seems like the adults will stay back and the juveniles will come up. Sometimes sightings we have or shadows will pick up, or hits we'll get on a thermal will be smaller, 6 foot, as opposed to the 7 or 8 foot ones, if you will. One of the ones that I've seen, I saw in Northwest Colorado in 2016 was 6.5 foot tall. I saw it at 90 feet because I went back. I was able to go back and see the place it was. Sometimes we get footprint casts from them and they're smaller, 13, 14, 15 inches, where full adults are 17, 18, 20. I've seen footprint casts 22, 24 inches long. So, they are smaller. They're part of the family, but they stay together as family units. At least that's what we're postulating.
I'm doing an interview. That happens from time to time. Sorry about that. So keep explaining. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I think I think they're in. I think it behooves them to stay in groups. I have a good Native American friend in Virginia. He always tells me there's never one of them. They're always in groups. You need to think of them as a tribe. Not just family, but then as a tribe and social order. Like they each have a role. And so that's changed my way of thinking over the years. So, whenever we're out there, if we hear a stick break or a footfall, one of them moving in a direction, 12 o'clock direction, I know there's one behind us at 6 o'clock. It's just the way they are. There's never one.
Is there any evidence of them, what they consume? Like, I mean, they're enormous. I mean, we're speaking anywhere from between 6 and 9 feet tall are these beings, and they're covered with fur. You said bipedal. How do you say it? Bipedal?
Bipedal.
Bipedal walk. And we can't really tell about gender, but is there any evidence of like remains of like something that they ate, or what they eat? Do you think that they are have an appetite for a certain kind of is it animal, like is it mammals they eat? Is it plant-based?
Yeah, so keep going. I think it's all of that.
So they eat whatever they can. I mean, I wonder if they consume the whole thing. I mean, they just look like they've got to be something that's kind of scary for even an animal to see, right? I mean,
yeah,
right?
they're they're we call that an apex predator, right? So yeah, I mean and there's charts you can look at out there that compare them to us bipedally to a bear and to a human, and your listeners can Google
It's
that
a
online and see.
footprint. There's a
Yeah,
footprint. This is by Peter Byrne.
yeah,
And
it's a good book.
yeah, it's a good read, right?
Mhm.
I have a number of books. I just grabbed a few. I was like, oh my gosh, I got to show a book. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead. About what they
Yeah,
eat.
we got listeners, that are interested. If you go to the books that are most highly rated on Amazon, and read some of Dr. Meldrum's books, Tom Powell's books, Robert Morgan. There are great books out there you can start with and learn. And there's some good podcasts too that are dedicated just to Sasquatch. Sasquatch Chronicles is great, and it's just people telling their stories of this. But there's more information now than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. It was very limited research for, I would say, the 60s, 70s, 80s, even into the 90s. Last 10 years has been more research, more people that are trying to understand this thing and what it is. But back to what they eat. As far as evidence, there have been farmers that have seen these things taking taking grain, taking things out of their barns, out of their outbuildings. Hunters have had them steal deer right out of their truck. So we know that they eat deer, or at least the internal organs and things from deer. They're very opportunistic eaters. They've been filmed and seen in dumpsters and and trash, going into taking things. But I think they have a cache somewhere in the woods. Every group or tribe is constantly going out and getting subsistence. So if they have to steal a bag of grain from a field that is being baited for deer from deer hunters, they'll do it. I talked to a witness, saw that recently. They're going to take whatever they can and they bring it back, to the refrigerator and the food storage locker somewhere that they've got in the woods for a group of them, and they share. I believe they work as a unit. And I don't think they're just night travelers. I think during the day they are out and about, and maybe they rest as they can. But if there's opportunistically, if there's a chance for them to get food, they will. Interestingly enough, I had a story in the area I am in, Western North Carolina, about a year and a half ago, where a Bigfoot had been observing the workers on a house, building a house. There's several houses in the neighborhood that was moved into a wooded area. And when the workers were on the roof putting down the shingles and things, and their food supply for later in the day was over in one area, came out of the woods and went and took it all. So they waited until the workers were up on the roof, but some of the workers turned and saw it running off with an armful of all the food that they had brought. Some of it was actually in jackets, in the pockets of jackets. They could smell it, and they took the jackets with them too. So I think they're always operating like that. They can find a place to get the food, they're gonna get food. And I think they're gonna eat whatever is plentiful in that area. It's probably different in Florida than it is in the state of Washington. I knew of a report, and I think it was in the state of Washington, where a group of hunters came upon a field and they were getting ready. They're, had their sights, etc. And across the field, down in the corner, was kind of a grove of berry bushes, blackberries primarily. And they saw that it was all indented and depressed in the center, and they saw movement. They looked. There's a Bigfoot with a sugar high laying there, with his arms up back in the blackberries, falling asleep. So it had its share of blackberries and blueberries. Blackberries fell asleep. I know I talked to a bear hunter a while ago. Bear hunters will put out a lot of sweets for the bear where they have traps, and 5-gallon buckets full of them. Donuts and all other kinds of things, sorghum, other things for the bear to come get. And I had the bear hunter showing up to see his bear bait at his place in the woods one morning. And he saw this thing as he was driving up, and where his bait was in the woods, and it was bent over. He reached for his gun, and as he pulled up the 2-track to get to it, the thing stood up and was 8 foot tall. And it was eating all of his bear, his bear bait. And it was a Bigfoot. So, that's a long answer, but it's clear to tell you they're going to eat whatever's available.
I like the long answers. So if you've encountered these and you have it, obviously you keep re-injecting yourself into these situations. It can't possibly be that you're scared of them or you're concerned out of, for your life. I mean, this is something, if it is that, I mean, it's this large, right? It's a large thing. Do you sense that you're receiving any kind of frequency or kind of energy from them that, I mean, are you having memories complete when you're experiencing this, or does it kind of put you in a place like, does your heart beat faster? What does it feel like?
So I'm glad you're bringing that up too. It varies. As I said, sometimes you get in a situation you can tell it's negative and they want you to go. I once at one point I kept hearing in I was doing some research singularly in the forested area in Wisconsin, but and they were around and they were prodding me. They were tossing things out of the woods at me, and I was looking through the binoculars, and finally they pushed a tree over behind me, scared the heck out of me, and I got in my head. I could hear run, run, don't look back, run, and I ran 250 yards. That was a negative encounter. I vividly remember getting in my truck driving away. My heart was racing. So, I've been zapped by these things. If they don't want you around, they'll give you a blast of negative energy. We call it infrasound, but they'll give you a blast of negative energy. It gives you the fight or flight feeling. And you got to go. You got to get out of there. I've seen people get nauseous from it. I've had it hit me where I couldn't move, or it overtook like my whole upper body. I couldn't even take a step forward. It wears off, but that's not what I'm looking for. I've had the opposite too. I've had situations that are so exhilarating and so fun. I was on a bridge once, and with a group in Iowa, and I was playing harmonica, and they were having fun. Every time I'd stop, they'd mimic it. We started to leave, and I said goodbye to them because I always talk to them. And we started to walk off the
You're
bridge.
talking to them?
Oh, I always talk to them. If they're in the woods, I tell them, "Hi, we're here. We mean no harm. We're here just because we're curious about you. If you want to give us a sign, if you want to be, part of the night, we're here. You're a beautiful section of woods here, and you have a lovely home. Thanks for welcoming us in." You think I'm crazy? Native
No,
American.
I think it's very interesting because you know what? They have an intelligence, obviously, so they're hearing you. They obviously can understand like some kind of communication.
And I believe they do. Native Americans always tell you, interact, talk to the woods, talk to the woods. I always coach people to talk to the woods, especially new people, when we're out, and it seems to settle things down. We don't act like hunters, we're not out there with the gun swinging and everything, and we don't do that. So if it's a positive interaction as opposed to when I describe it as negative, if it's positive, it can go on a while. Sometimes they don't even want you to leave.
Really?
And it's 2:30, we're tired, we're going. And they'll stomp on the ground, they'll parallel you as you're walking down back to trailhead. Maybe your electronics will go out. They do things because they don't want you to go. They whistle, whoop, make noises. They're like little kids sometimes too. Where are you going? Don't go. We've actually heard things, like woo woo. It sounds like, it sounds like, why are you going? You get a sense in your head. They're like, don't leave, don't leave. And you can't project human characteristics, human feelings and thoughts onto these things. So I'm not doing it because I'm a thrill seeker. I'm out there because I continue to have experiences I can't, always figure out. On this past weekend, at one point, we had been sitting in the dark, a group of 5 of us, for a while, and then decided we're going to light a fire. It was getting colder. It was going towards midnight. We started a light. We had heard them and suspected they were around the perimeter. 2 of us started to light the fire and heard out of the woods, no, word no, long no, it drew out. As much as they don't like the fire, as they were saying, don't light the fire. Maybe they didn't want to see the light. I don't know. But we clearly heard that word, long and drawn out. The other Saturday night, our group, some of us said, if you're acknowledging, if you and I are talking and you're showing me you understand something, or I'll go, that's it's 2 syllable kind of thing. We heard that out of the woods several times. They're mimicking us, but I think they were also trying to tell us they comprehended. We had put the Native American music on, over, and at different times we heard it. So, and we had recorders on, so we'll be able to review all this. But sometimes it's interactive, is what I'm saying, and I guess that's one of the reasons I like to do it. Because you have experiences, you walk away and say, wow, that was crazy, and it's a positive energy, it hangs with you. I had, one other positive energy story. I was on one in Kentucky a couple of years ago, and beautiful part of the woods. We're in their wildlife preserve, and I was commenting on it with another gentleman who was with me, who was a professor, four of us, and we were commenting how beautiful it was. And he said to me, "Why don't you tell them how beautiful the woods are, Rick? Really, let them know." So I put my arms up. Robert Morgan always says, "Put your arms out like this." So I did this, and I was talking and saying, "Thank you for letting us be here. This is a beautiful section of the woods. If you're there, we love the canopy of trees here. It's nice to be, in your home. Thanks for welcoming us." I felt like something picked me up and lifted me up into the sky, like by the back. Literally, I felt like I was elevated above everybody else. This hung on to me for about 10 to 15 minutes. It was like getting stoned. I don't know what the heck happened, but I got this exhilaration and this tingliness all over me that was, it was terrific. It felt great. It was almost like it was transferred into me. But it happened after I did what this professor suggested, let's acknowledge. And he was talking while I was doing it too. Yes, yes, we're all so glad to be here. And he goes, "There's a positive energy going on. It's part of everything in the forest, the trees. They're here. They're here," he kept saying, because he was picking something up too. But it was literally, it was like they put their hand on me and picked me up in the air and held me above her. I felt like I was floating. I don't know what the heck that is. Now, I can tell you that, but there's an awful lot of Bigfoot researchers out there that if I told that to, they'd, throw me out the window, because it's all physical and you've got to have just the footprint cast and da 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 da. How many dermal ridges on the big toe? Well, that's great, but I'm telling you, this was crazy. It was a wonderful feeling, an odd feeling, and it's the counter to having rocks thrown at you or a tree pushed down.
It's very interesting and very unusual. And I'm not someone who's gonna like close my mind to anything. If it's hard for me to really confirm anything unless I have the experience myself and I see it in front of me. However, I have an open mind until something proves that to be not possible. And I would rather listen and hear an actual story like you're saying, or an experience, and take that into consideration than seeing some print of a foot, that allegedly is, we're speculating, is that a Bigfoot? Because I mean, people don't have photos or videos. I mean, there's very few. There's the famous one that's on this book cover here, right? Or it's like a cartoon shot of it, right? Which is I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's
Patterson Gimlin.
Patterson and Goodland, yeah. And so that was, they went on and first said this was fake. No, they first said, "Is it real?" And then they said, "Oh no, they debunked it." And then they went back to saying that nothing could move the way it moved in this video. Have you ever had any of your participants have a video or a photo, or any of these other experts have any like actual physical evidence that there's the Bigfoot?
Well, yeah, and some of us have gotten photos of, especially with infrared FLIR, something in the woods. I actually have some of those. A face in the woods, something looking at you. FLIR will pick up a heat signature, and you can see the outline. You can see the head of it move side to side, or the eyes blink, etc. So we do get, we're out in the woods at night a lot. We get a lot of that. It's very hard to know exactly where one of these things are going to be during the day and get an image of it as it, crosses. The interesting thing about the Patterson Gimlin film is it was taken, you could see it during the day. They came into that dry creek bed, Northern California.
Bluff Creek, right?
Yeah, and Patty, which is a female.
Right, it was
Patty, that one. She was moving through the creek bed, and they happened to, they had camera equipment with them and started it up and caught it going away from them. And then that film got out. It was published and got out well before there was, in today's day and age, something like that, if it was out, it gets censored, quickly. Get picked up, whether it's by the government or however, but you wouldn't see it. There's a lot of videos show up online. My experience over the last 12, 13 years, videos will show up online. They're pretty darn good, and then they're gone. Yeah, I can't explain that either, but they, quite often.
You just did. Any evidence is taken off. Do you, so you don't, so none of you share your photos because of that?
No.
Because you don't want to be found, like you don't want anyone to kind of question you about it? Why?
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a witness who has these things on his property, and we've been researching them for 5 years. I mean, he's seen them. He's got neighbors that have seen them. He has stations. He interacts with them with food and toys. I've been on his property many times. I've seen them on his property. I got a heat signature of a giant face of one of these things. Kind of looks like Mr. Magoo looking around a tree one night at 2:30 in the morning. I'm not sharing that with anybody.
Can I see it?
Yeah, I'm not, and I'm not, so at this point, you just don't know. What's the process? It's not like you can call up your local government Bigfoot research submittal office and they say, oh, this is great. Here's the form. Come on down. We're going to put it out online. There's nothing like that. So I think you talk a lot about UFOs and, ghost activity, et cetera, angels, et cetera. There's an awful lot of spirits, energy formations, paranormal, et cetera, that are, unexplained. And I'm sympathetic with the government. I don't think the government knows how to explain all this stuff. I mean, they're fooling around with the UFO UAP thing now, and every now and they had the Tic Tac video a year ago, and so there is some military acknowledgement that we don't know what these things are, but it's a conditioning process. All this stuff just doesn't show up overnight with government validation or military validation. But
Nobody knows all about that stuff, and the government has their own Black Project secret space program, and they have their own black triangles and TikToks, and they can't move like a spaceship, but they are close to it, and they probably know all about Bigfoot. And that's why it's smart you don't show anyone these infrared photos of Bigfoot. So I get it.
yeah, I think they know of this thing. I really do. I just
They
don't think
do. They know
I just don't,
everything. There's probably tribes of them all in Antarctica.
and you know what? I just don't think they know everything about it. And so the knowledge about this thing as some of those others is much greater than they have or possess at this time. So, I don't give the government as much credit with knowing or being omniscient when it comes to these things. I think they're, where it's helpful, like in the military, they probably know about it. But some of the things that people report seeing out there, the dogmen type things and the mothman and all this, where is that all going to go? And are those real or not? I don't know. I really don't. But I think people see things. People experience and see things, hear things that are out there, and whether you believe the veil is thin from time to time or it's interdimensional. I don't know. I've never been in another dimension. I can't tell you. But are things cross back and forth?
Right.
I don't. I'm sympathetic that I don't believe the government, any government maybe in the world, can explain all that. So, from that standpoint, I am. But to just take stuff and censor it, I don't like that either.
Right. I don't like that either. I don't understand why we can't just know everything. Yes, there's many cryptids out there that are basically under the radar. I watched this series, but if anything that's on television, it's all figured out before it gets to television, just to show us maybe a little glimpse of something or
Yep.
make us, I don't know what, Skywalker Ranch, that series.
Yes.
You ever see that? And they
Yes.
kind
It's
of
true.
covered a lot of the paranormal and supernatural. And, I've had my own experiences, and you just mentioned a few times because I've been in a few places that are haunted. And whether or not it's like a good spirit or it's like a evil spirit. And maybe, there's some good Sasquatch Bigfoots and not so nice Sasquatch,
Right. Right.
right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
to me, it's so interesting. I'm going to really look into if there's this area in New York that you mentioned early on in this discussion, because if there is some kind of expedition here in New York, then I'm going to head off and see if I can join it. How can viewers? You shared the BFRO and how they can go. It's BFRO.com, correct?
BFRO.net.
Oh, .net, sorry. And that's how they can join an expedition. How can you be reached, or how can they kind of follow you in any way? You have this book online, which I believe I got it from did I get it on Amazon or did I get it through, were you the source of this book? And this is all these stick structures, which are basically kind of like a marking on a trail, or you're kind of trying to figure out what exactly is this, but it's very intricate, because if you look at this photo right here of Rick, you can see that he's this size, and it's a giant must have created this.
Right.
Right?
Right. Well, and that when they create these, so Bigfoots will engineer and build these stick structures in the woods, and you know they have different forms, and I have the different types. I think I have 7 types in there. But I actually have a newer version of that. I'll send you one. So
Okay, we'll have to get the new version.
I'm up to the 4th version on it, and I have glyphs in it too. They'll build glyphs on the ground sometimes. Researchers find them outside their tents and things. So they're trying to communicate. And I think the stick structures, they're communicating with each other with those, but the glyphs they leave are communication for us. But we see repeat type communications. I could get into that for an hour too. You know, there are certain types they show over and over, and we don't know what they mean. But they will try to communicate with us through leaving sticks or rocks on the ground in different patterns. And they group into similar types of patterns. I'd love to see you go on an expedition. I think it'd be great for you to get out there. I'll tell you what happens too with us when we're out in the woods and things. We stumble upon, this is right up your alley, but we stumble upon hillbilly type cemeteries and things out in the woods, and we have ghost encounters that happen. And you know, I've heard my name called out of the cemetery. We've had things happen, ghost apparitions show up on film for us, and Bigfoots are around cemeteries quite often. We see sometimes, I mentioned the balls of light, we see UFOs. We're in a field somewhere, and all of a sudden we sense activity of Bigfoot, and over the field comes this UFO type thing. So yeah, there's a lot of crossover, and I don't know what it all is. I don't think we've witnessed or seen an angel yet, but I'm certainly open-minded. But there is a lot.
You just mentioned it, so it's going to happen for you.
It'd be great. I would love that. That'd be great. Maybe that's what picked me up in Kentucky that time. But you know, I think when you go through one door and into paranormal world, all of a sudden there's a lot of other doors start to open, and Bigfoot's a way to do that. But yeah, BFRO.net, you can check. People can go on BFRO and look right to their county and their state and see where there's been activity. Iknowsquatch. Go to that. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We have an Etsy store. That's where you can get that book.
Okay.
And we're in a lot of different shows. We usually go to 6 or 8 shows every year. And either I'll be speaking at one in Marion, North Carolina in 2 weeks, and then in Virginia, middle of Virginia, I'm going to be talking at one up near Staunton, Virginia. And we'll be at a variety of different ones through the course of the year. Just got back from Florida, and we'll be selling merchandise. I love to talk to people that come on up, tell me about their, what's happened on their farm or their property. And, sometimes it's really good for people just to get that off their chest, I would say for the most part, when they're talking to me and showing me things, stick structures, other things, they've got realistic stories. I'm looking for the behavioral characteristics that align. I'm looking for the behavior that, yep, yes, that's Bigfoot, If it isn't, I'll tell them. But I'm looking, for me at this point, I'm fascinated with their behavior.
So tell us in the future, you said, what's the name of the event that you're doing that's coming up? I can post it on the profile, on the description for this. Do you want to tell us? What did you say?
Yeah, we'll be at the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Festival this coming weekend.
Okay,
it's in Townsend, Tennessee, and then it'd be at Marion. That's the Western North Carolina Bigfoot Festival, Marion, North Carolina. I'll be speaking at that on Saturday, and that's in 3 weeks from this past weekend. And that is big. The whole town of Marion, they closed down, and there'll be 20,000, 30,000 people at that. So that's a great event. So if anybody's in that part of the world wants to, that's a great event to be at. Follow online, because lots and lots of people come to that. But and then around the country, look, there's a lot of Bigfoot conferences, things like that on the West Coast. Certain states are onto this and active with it, and other areas not so much. But more than not, if you start Googling, looking up Bigfoot, different places, you might be able to see some things. You can go listen to some speakers like myself talk about this subject.
And you can be found, I know, on Instagram. It's Iknowsquatch.
Yep. Squatch.
Watch, and then you are on Facebook,
Yep.
and they can reach you, and I'll put that also.
Yep.
Is there anything any message or any information you'd like to share with the viewers before we go?
Yeah. Well, first off, Bigfoot's real. You know, I've seen it. You know, I've experienced the physical side of it, the physical evidence. I know it's a real thing. So people out there that have a list, you know, of what's real and not, ghosts, UFOs, Mothman, big whatever it is, you can take Bigfoot off the list. I know it's a real thing. And secondly, if people are interested in it, get out. You got to get out in the woods. Not everything in the woods is Bigfoot. There's an awful lot of, you know, earthly explanations for animals and sounds in the woods. But you know, I would say be open-minded. Don't go alone when you go on out in the woods. I always urge people to be with someone else, buddy system. Um, you know, get out there and who knows? You know, if you hear something, if you have an experience, you know, you reach out to some of us that have been doing this a while. We'd be glad to talk to you about that. And you can find me. I'll give you my email for all my Bigfoot's info is rrr whoop WHOOP
Okay.
@gmail.com. So
Okay. I've got to write that down. I'll put it on the description as well. You
okay.
you put that, you message me that, so I put that on the description. Okay.
I will do that. Yes.
This was a complete and utter joy, Rick. Thank you for
Oh, great.
joining us tonight, and I hope you come back another time and join us on Living in the Light. And I'm sure everyone's going to really enjoy this interview and find information about Bigfoot Sasquatch that they never knew.
Yeah, I wanted to read up on it as much as I can. Thanks for having me on Living in the Light. This is great. I appreciate your open mindedness.
Yes.